Hey everybody, NacroVMX here, and time for another Photoshop tutorial. This is the third one that I had planned, and basically I came up with 3 ideas for Photoshop tutorials, so this may be the last one for a while until I come up with more ideas of what Photoshop tutorials I could possibly do. But today I'm going to show you something that for the, we'll say, drawing challenge or artistically challenge would be a big help, is to draw a tree just using Photoshop, some simple brushes and techniques. Some of the techniques that I showed you in the previous 2 tutorials will be used. If you're artistically challenged, like if you're someone who can, make stuff in Photoshop, but you can't actually draw, like I can make great stuff in Photoshop, but I can't actually sit and draw. If somebody told me draw a tree, it's going to look like cartoon broccoli. So I'm going to show you how to make a fairly good looking tree in Photoshop without actually having to draw anything. So the first thing you're going to need is the outline of the tree. So let's open a new document. Let's do, 1024 by 1024 is fine. Resolution's a little high, but that's fine. Make sure the background contents is transparent, and then just hit OK. And there's our document. It's actually zoomed out to 2/3, but that's okay. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is get the outline of a tree. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. If you're pretty good with a mouse, and you can just take the brush tool here, just like the brush tool, and just select like a regular, like a smaller brush, and just kind of draw the outline of a tree, like that, and the branches and all that. But if you don't want to do that, see, it looks like crap, so I'm just going to undo and get rid of all that. And that's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is to bring up an actual photograph of a tree. Like if I was to go here and go to Google, images.google.com, and let's say I wanted to do a maple tree, so I'll type in maple tree, and I would find a pretty good image to use. Like, for example, this is a pretty good image to use. And I could just bring that up and save it. And then go back to Photoshop and open it. And I think I saved it on the desktop. And then what you could do is you could use the marquee tool, or you could hit select and hit all to select it all. Copy, edit, copy, and then go here and paste it. And I'd actually want to make it a little bigger, so I would use the free transform with Control T, or you can go into Edit, Free Transform, and then hold Shift and scale it up like that. And then what I would do in this case is you create a new layer by going over here and hitting New Layer, or going to Layer, New Layer, or hitting Shift Control N. And on the new layer, you take the brush tool and you just trace over it. Trace over the outline of the tree and the branches and all that. And then you would make, after you got that done, you would make the first layer invisible. But you'd have to do the whole outline and everything. So that's another way of doing it. A third way of doing it, and this is the way I'm actually going to do. Let me get rid of that tree there. Hold on a second. Let me just create a new layer and get rid of the old one. Is to use a brush. Now, there's a lot of brushes out there that are shaped like trees. Once again, you can just go to Google and just type Photoshop brushes trees, and you're just going to get, like here, complete tree brush pack, 30 high-res tree brushes, and just go to any of these websites and download the brushes. Once you save it, it doesn't matter where you save it, you're just going to load the brush. So I already have the brushes. I have all my brushes in here. But I'm going to show you how to load a brush. Basically, make sure you have the brush tool selected. It's right here. If you don't see it, right-click there. You might be looking at the pencil tool or the color replacement tool. Or you just hit B if you do see it, instead of clicking on it. And up here where the brush size is, click on this arrow, and then click on this arrow here. And you're going to hit Load Brushes, and then select the brush you want. I'm just going to select a random one, like this one, for example. And when you hit Load, it might append it to the bottom, or it might ask you, do you want to replace the current brushes? If you hit OK, it's going to get rid of all your brushes and only put the ones that you loaded there. If you hit cancel, it'll do nothing, and if you hit append, they'll go on the bottom. If you wind up getting rid of your brushes and you want them back, all you have to do is click here and just put the regular brushes, which is basic brushes. So there are more brushes than what show here, because you can go square brushes, stitch as a thread, and then you could load brushes. So once you have your tree brush, select the one you want to use, and scale it down to they're usually pretty big, so you want to scale it down to a pretty good size. I'm not crazy about that one. I want one with more branches. Let's see. There's a good one. Let's use this one. Let me scale it up a little more than that. And just click. Make sure you have opacity at 100% and flow at 100%. Just click. Now you have the outline of a tree. Now you also have the leaves, so don't worry about that. We'll be getting rid of those leaves and replacing them with our own way better leaves. The next thing you want to do is you want to create a bark texture, because obviously we don't want our tree to be all black. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open my wood texture. That would be over here. Wood 2 I use. And just bring up, I'm just showing you how to adapt a wood texture into a bark texture. You could also download a bark texture. You can create your own from scratch. You can get a picture of bark, however you want to do it. But if you happen to have a wood texture lying around that you've made or that you've gotten, I'm going to show you a few tricks on how to convert this into bark. The first thing you want to do is, since bark is darker than that, we're going to want to get the burn tool out. So here's the burn tool. If you're not seeing it, it's with the dodge tool and sponge tool, so just switch to that. And get a nice big brush like that, maybe a little bigger. And make sure the range is on midtones and the exposure is at 100%. And just go over the whole thing twice. So here we're going over it once. If you hold the click down, you can get the whole thing without having to go over it again. And then click again and do it a second time. You can do it as many times as you want. You don't want it to be too dark, but you do want it to be darker. When it starts looking like really stained wood, that's what you want to do. Now switch the range over to highlights and go over it once to dull over the highlights. So just go ahead and do that. No big deal. And then also go over the spots where there's crazy highlights there. The spots that you're going to go over like that are going to look kind of gray, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. That's fine. Just go over it. Just dull out any outstanding highlights that you see, so that it's all basically the same brightness. Okay, once you have that done, what we're going to want to do is over here in the layers palette, the first thing you're going to do is check to see if you have one of these lock icons. If you do, you want to get rid of that. So you just double click on it and hit OK, and it'll be unlocked. Now select the Channels tab, and you're going to go down here and hit this button that's Create New Channel, and it's going to be called Alpha 1. And we're going to do a filter here. So we're going to go into our Filters menu, go to Render, and then you're going to select Fibers. For variance, I'm going to move it up to about 17 or 18 is good. 17 is where I usually put it. The strength you want to move up a lot to somewhere in the 50s. 55 is pretty good, and then hit that, and it's going to render these fibers. Now switch back to the red, green, blue channel by clicking on it, and then switch back to the layers palette, and then go back into your filters, go to render, and go to lighting effects, and use a spotlight. And actually, we're going to put the spotlight source at the top, and we're going to widen it out as much as possible. Okay. So it's going to be nice and bright. Don't worry, it's not going to actually look that bright. Let's see. Put the focus all the way up. The gloss, bark is kind of shiny, so you want to put that all the way up. The material, you want it to be more plastic, so like right around there. Don't worry about it being burnt out like that. The exposure, you want it to be a little more underexposed, and the ambiance, you want it to be a little bit positive, not a whole lot. And switch the texture channel to Alpha 1. It's going to look like that. It doesn't look like bark right now, but you're just going to have to trust me on this. So hit OK. And as you can see, let me zoom into 100%. It already does kind of look like bark. The only problem is these white dots that are everywhere. Those are the highlights from the lighting effects. So we're just going to use the burn tool on 100% and highlights to just burn out those highlights. You might have to go over it like 2 or 3 times, but if you want to do it really quickly, instead of doing it like this, one way to do it is to take the brush size and pump it all the way up to 2500 and then just click and drag a few times. That way it does like the whole thing at once. See, now it's starting to look like bark. So if you zoom in, you can see it looks like bark. So that's good enough for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the whole thing by hitting Select and All, or hit Control A, and then we're going to copy Merged, or you could just use Copy since it's only one layer. Go back over to your tree, not that tree, this tree, and you're going to paste it. Now, now you're going to want to scale it. You might want to zoom out for this. I'm going to use Control and minus to zoom out, and then bring up the free transform, which is Control and T, and I'm going to scale it so that it's covering the wood, so it's small as possible, but that it's covering all of the wood parts. So basically, like that. Let's see. Yeah. And all right. So just hit Enter when you're done. Now, let's zoom back into 100%. Now what we're going to do is we're going to erase the whole thing, but we're not going to just use the eraser tool, because once you erase something with the eraser tool, it's gone. And the only way to bring it back is to use undo, and if you go too far, you can't undo. You can only undo a couple of times. So we're actually going to use a technique called a layer mask, and a layer mask lets you hide or reveal a layer without actually destroying any information. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on this icon here. Make sure your layer is active, your bark layer. Click on this icon here. It looks like I think it looks like a camera. It's just like a circle inside a square. Add layer mask. You can click that. It's probably somewhere here in the layers menu too. Yeah, here, layer mask, and then you would hit like a new one or whatever. But I always just click that. Now, it's going to create this sort of secondary layer that's all white, which is linked by that chain thing to your layer. And now if you select the layer thumbnail, you can actually affect the layer, but if you select this, you're going to affect the layer mask. Now it's all white. The two colors that we're going to be working with are white and black. So hit D on your keyboard to switch to default colors, which is white and black, and then hit X to make black the foreground. Remember, X switches between the two and D goes back to default. Now get your brush tool out and select a normal brush, a nice big one, like that one there is fine. And what you're going to do is when you paint black on a layer mask, it reveals... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not on the layer mask. Click there. It reveals what's below it. It hides the layer and reveals the layer below it. So you're going to hide the entire thing. If you want to just use the paint bucket, you can do that, and it'll do the whole thing at once, and you'll see the layer is all black now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in closely, and to do this precisely, we're going to use the zoom tool, which is down here. So just right-click on the, left-click on the zoom tool, or hit Z on your keyboard, and then you just click and drag a selection, and it's going to zoom into that selection. See what I mean? Now what you're going to do here is you're going to paint on the layer mask with white using your brush tool. So switch back to the brush tool and get a much, much smaller brush. And, oh, you got to switch to white. So hit X to switch to white, or you could hit D. And just, oh, see? If you go outside the line, it's like a coloring book. You don't want to go outside the line. You can just hit X and go over it again with the black. So just go over the whole thing here. If you need more precision, like the part where there's the roots there or whatever, you can just use a smaller brush. Just go over the whole thing. Anywhere where you want there to be wood, or bark rather, you're going to go over it with... I'm going to scroll up with my mouse wheel here. You just go over it with the white on your layer mask. It's already starting to look pretty cool, but there's more techniques. This is probably my most involved Photoshop tutorial to date. So, okay, you don't have to go too far because a lot of this is going to wind up being covered in leaves. See, this is too big, so let me switch back there. Okay, switch back. So we'll go over that with a smaller brush in a little bit. first let me get all the parts that I could do with this, like the trunk and the larger branches. Okay. Like I said, you don't have to go like really, really far up, but because a lot of this you're just going to cover with leaves anyway. I like a lot of leaves. I like a big bushy tree. But go over, you know, as much of it as you think you want to show, basically. Remember, if you make mistakes, just switch back to black and go over it. That's far enough with that. Oopsie. Let's get rid of that one. All right. Let's go down here and also get this here. I'm actually going to be scaling this tree down, so you don't have to worry about too much of the details. Like a lot of these like really thin branches, you don't have to worry about. But, oh. Let me get a smaller brush now. Actually, wait. Still, there we go. Okay, let me get a smaller brush. And you just go over some of the thin branches. Don't go too nuts with this, because some of it, at this point, it's so small that you're not making that much of a difference anyway. And like I said, I'm going to be scaling it down. I'm just showing you that you can do this if you're going to leave the tree being very large. You're going to do that. Okay. Let's go down here and get this. Oop, nice. All right, that's pretty much good enough. Let me zoom out here. So we got a pretty good looking wood part of the tree, but the thing is it all looks the same. It looks flat. So if you remember the technique from my second Photoshop tutorial using the burn tool, we're going to do that. Except you can't do that on the layer mask. You have to actually select the layer thumbnail and then get your burn tool out. Select a good size soft brush, and a little bigger than that, I think. I'm going to zoom back in. Use the burn tool and just burn the sides of it. Oh, make sure you switch to midtones and lower the exposure. Just to give it that 3D look so that it's not all... Ooh, sorry about that. So that it's not all flat looking. This is already pretty dark, so you don't have to go over it too many times. I'm not going to bother too much with the smaller brushes, but if I was going to leave the tree this big, I would go over it a lot more. And don't forget to... I'm not going to bother with the highlights in this case, but I'm going to do the shadows on the very edges there. Just the very, very edges. Careful on that, though. Get a smaller brush. Okay. There we go. It's starting to look really good. And then, of course, remember to switch back to the dodge tool and do a little bit of dodging of the middle portions on the midtones. Up the exposure a little bit more. Okay, to give it even more of a 3D look. I'm only going to do that with the trunk and just a couple of these really big branches here. So let's zoom out, and you can see it no longer looks, it looks rounded like a tree should. It no longer looks like it's flat. Just a little, oh, that's dodge. I wanted burn. Just over there a little more. Oh. There we go, much better. Okay, so we're pretty much done with the trunk part. Now we're going to create the leaves. Now, to do the leaves, we're going to use another brush that actually comes with Photoshop. And it's in the special effects brushes. So if you want to load it, you go here. Actually, let me switch to my brush tool. You go here, then here, and then you're going to click on special effects brushes and click on a pen to put them on the bottom. Or if you only want to work with them, you can click on OK. I have them loaded all times. So the one you're going to look for is this. The special effects brushes start with this one, which is the azalea, and it goes through to the butterfly one. The one you want is this one, falling ivy leaves. Now, let's not brush on this layer. Let's create a new layer. So make a new layer. Now, if you were going to brush on it, it's going to look like this. And you think, well, that's crap, so let me undo that. The first thing we want to do is we're going to change the color. So let's bring up click on your foreground color and click on where green is, and just select a nice green that you want. And then actually click on your background color and select another green that's either slightly lighter or slightly dark. I'm going to go with slightly darker. And now if you were to paint on it, it would look like that. Now that looks pretty cool, but not quite. So let's undo it. First of all, it's too big, so let's lower the master diameter, and you can just keep, lower it even more than that. Keep experimenting with it until you find the size you want. Okay, that's a good size. Now, the leaves should cast shadows. So what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on the new layer, and we're going to go to Blending Options, and just click on Drop Shadow. You don't really have to mess with any of these. One thing that I am going to mess with is I like the blend mode to be actually normal instead of multiply, so click on that. And you could up the opacity if you want to 100%, but other than that I would leave everything else alone. So just hit OK. Now when you brush, the leaves are going to cast shadows. And just to show you an example, I'm going to actually show you. This is with the shadows, and that's without the shadows. It's a subtle difference, but it is an important difference. But anyway, let me get rid of those leaves for now, because we're not done messing with the brush. Now we're going to actually edit the brush, and the way you do that is by bringing up the brush presets, which I believe is over here. Yes. You could also hit F5. That's the way I usually do it. So if you don't have this or you don't want to mess with that, just hit F5 on your keyboard and it'll bring it up. Now this is where you can actually use this to create your own brushes. You go through each of these and you can mess around. Go to the shape dynamics and just mess with the size jitter. This is going, right now the size jitter is at 0, which means all the leaves are the exact same size, but we don't want that. We're going to up it to, let's say about half, so that some of them will be very small and some of them will be very large. Or you can go all the way up to 100, but I think around half, like around 50% is fine. The minimum diameter, if you want a lot of jitter but you don't want them to get too small, you can raise that up, but they're fine like that. The angle jitter is, it controls how much they'll go in different directions. If it's at 0, they'll all be facing the same direction. If it's at 100%, they'll all be facing different directions. Leave it at about 22 or a quarter, and that's pretty good, because leaves generally do face the same general direction with some minor variance. Don't mess with the roundness for leaves, or, we're just going to leave those alone. The scattering, the scatter is at 398. That's pretty good. You could scatter them more or less. It depends on, what you want to work with. So I would leave it the way it is. You could also click on both axes, but I just like to leave that unclicked. The count is how many leaves will appear with each brush stroke. You can up it to a lot. I would say leave it at 1. You want to work subtle, and the count can also jitter, but I'm going to leave that at 0%. You could add texture to it if you're working with others. I'm not going to add texture to it because I'm going to be scaling the tree down, so there's really no need to have that level of detail. You do want to click on color dynamics, and you want to make sure the foreground background jitter is at 100%. It won't show it here because the preview is always in black and white. It's always monochrome. But basically, it's going to jitter between the two colors that you have as your foreground and background. So, and if you have two wildly different colors, like if I had like red and then like green, it would go through all the shades between red and green as long as the jitter was at 100%, and you'd have to up the hue jitter a little more. I'm actually going to up that to about half. I'm going to show you what that looks like. See, if you up the hue jitter, you can get a nice autumn kind of thing. But it's, I'm not doing autumn, so I'm just going to keep it at around 5. See? Maybe a little more, actually. Let me up it to about 15. See, that looks good. Okay. You could also jitter the saturation or the brightness, and of course there's the purity, but I'm going to leave those alone. So pretty much done with those. So let's hide that for now. Now, you're just going to want to brush on some leaves here, and just use the brush of the tree outline as a guide, just where to stop. So I'm going to start around the edges, actually. And just don't go too crazy now. Leave plenty of room. Okay, now that we've got that, we can hide the original layer by clicking there, because we're not going to be using that. This is just a little more, just in the spots that have big gaps. Now, let me actually go over it with a larger brush in a new layer. So create a new layer, and we're going to go over it with larger brush, and we're going to do more this time. Now, leaves are going to cast shadows on each other, so you want to have the same drop shadow effect. If you want to copy effects from one layer to another, the easiest way to do it is to right-click on the layer and hit Copy Layer Style, and then right-click on this layer and hit Paste Layer Style. And then each time you want to create a new one with the same layer style, and just give me some more leaves. Let me lower that a bit, actually. See, it's starting to fill in nicely, but don't put too many leaves on one layer, or it starts to all meld together. So when you start to get a nice effect, go ahead and hit New Layer, copy the layer style over, paste the layer style, and then go. Okay, and you might, in each time, if you want to, you might want to change the size to be subtle. You can change the colors. If you're doing like an autumn tree, each layer will be a different color. So that's another thing you can do. Just keep working here. And that's so the leaves are casting shadows on the leaves below them. And there's really no magic number to how many layers you want to have. But I generally find that the more you go, the better it looks. So I just keep going. Now, when you've reached the layer that you want to be kind of the top layer, we'll say this next one will be the last one. Copy layer style, paste layer style. Make it smaller. And bring up the presets. And what you're going to do is you're going to want to do less scattering so that you can get it more precise. And just now fill in a lot of the gaps. Like that. So that there's not too much light showing through the tree. And if you do a smaller one on top, it kind of gives it a little texture too. Leave gaps around the edges though, because that's the way trees look like. So there we have a perfectly respectable tree done by somebody who really can't draw. Let's just zoom out so you can see the whole thing. Now, if you want to get one layer that's a copy of all the layers merged and preserving a layer, I mean, you could do this a couple of ways. You can actually flatten the entire image by going to the Layers menu and hitting Flatten Image. And what that'll do, it'll say Discard Hidden Layers. You would hit OK. And you would just get one layer with that's everything. But if you don't want to do that, let me undo. Another way to do it is to go to Layer and then hit Merge Visible. And it's kind of similar, except it'll preserve the hidden layers if you want to keep your background or whatever. But if you want to do that but still keep all the layers, instead of hitting Control Shift E, what you want to do, Photoshop doesn't actually advertise that this is a thing, but you would do Control Shift Alt and E all together. And you'll get a brand new layer, and then you can actually disable all these other layers. And the reason you do this is if you're not satisfied with one layer, you can go back and change it without messing with all of them. Hold on a second. I seem to see a little bit of highlights on the bark layer there, but in this case I'll just edit this one. So let me just get my burn tool out and just take care of that. I don't know why I didn't notice that before. I mean, it looks fine actually. I just wanted to... You know what, I'm going to leave it actually. I like the way it looks. So let me zoom out. So there's your tree, and if you want to scale it down, you could use the edit transform. That's why you have to merge them, because otherwise you'd have to select each and every one layer, holding control and clicking on them, and then scale them all down at once. But hold shift and scale it down. And if you wanted to make like if you're doing a landscape and you wanted a whole bunch of these trees, you can duplicate them with Control J a bunch of times, and then just make yourself like a little forest here, See? But that's how you would do a tree in Photoshop. So I might have more Photoshop tutorials sometime in the future, but for now that's all I have planned. So if I think of anything else, I'll do another one. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was useful to you, and I'll see you soon.